Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Just gonna share my screen. Okay, so my presentation is, like Miya just said, image-driven modeling of the human aorta. So today is kind of a demo of basically how the pipeline works all the way from image to the final model slash, the model that's ready for simulation. And I'll show you guys a little bit about the simulation itself as well. So the motivation for this is obviously to have accurate models of actual human aorta. So we're going to start with CT images of actual people, and then we're going to go from there to model its geometry, and then go from there to have a computer model, which we can put through with computer simulations and deduct basically points of interest and parameters of interest. So I'm going to get started. So first thing you do is obviously you start with images. So the images I started with was actually not the CT images itself, but someone has actually kindly segmented it already for me. So what I have is actually a series of 1,800 images. That's basically a cross-section of the aorta. So what you're looking at right now is, I believe, the top of the aorta, and it keeps going. So it's not very interesting right now to look at it because every image is kind of just a circle, but just know that it's a cross section. That's why you only see like a little bit. So all the other abdominal features have already been eliminated because it's already segmented. And you can see here as well, sometimes you have different things. So for example, here you'll have cross sections where the cross section crosses the aorta at different points. So you're going to have a few circles. So these are the images I started with. And then, so we're very simple MATLAB code that I can show you guys if you're interested. You're going to end up with just a VTK model. So this is basically just all the images stacked together. There's nothing very interesting to this. It's just from the top, it stacks together and it stacks all the way to the bottom. So this is our second step. So going from image to a VTK model. Very straightforward for now. The next few points here are all going to be done with SimVascular. So SimVascular is this open source software that everybody can download right now on their computer if they want to. It's a very powerful tool, and it's a GUI interface that really, it's pretty intuitive for me. And I'm going to show you guys how it looks like. So as you can see, this interface here is actually already separated into the steps of the pipeline. So again, it's very intuitive. So you're going to start off with the images. So you're going to add and replace image, and you're going to go to basically your VTK. When it imports, you're going to see basically this. So these are the three views, axial, sagittal, and coronal views of the VTK you just imported. And this is kind of a 3D representation of it. It's just the three views stacked together. So you can move through this all you want. It's basically what you just said, but what you just saw in ParaView, but in images form. So now that we have done these, I'm gonna do a path center line. So what does that mean? That means that we're trying to put an approximate center line through all the lumens of the vessel. So that means, I'll show you guys the end result of what that's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like this. So the yellow line here is the center line. And as you can see, it will cross through all the vessels. And you can see here also that it's divided into different paths. So each path represents a single vessel. So even though these vessels are will intersect, you want to do like a single tube as one path, and you're going to combine them later. So now I will show you guys how to actually get this very nice looking path through the model. What we're going to do is we're going to create a path. I'm just going to name it a test. These parameters you can leave alone unless you want something like extremely specific. Like, so this is basically how many points on the path you're going to have. So obviously more points means that it's going to be more complicated. So 100 is usually good. So double click on this test, and I'm just going to minimize this. So you're going to have this show up. So this is basically the interface where you're going to create your path. So what you're going to do is you're going to try to find, so obviously the easiest one to work with is probably the main one. So obviously here, so this view is pretty good. I can see kind of the aorta going from here all the way to here. So note that it is backward. So I'm not sure why it imports backward, but this can be easily fixed by just reversing the VTK. So I'm gonna try to see if I can find the start of the main aorta. So maybe around here maybe. So, oh, actually maybe here. Yeah, so it goes from here to here on this view. So we're gonna go towards around where I think it starts. It doesn't have to be very precise. And you're gonna try to center your crosshair using the different views. So you're gonna try to center it at least on 2 views to make sure that it's centered in a 3D model. So I'm gonna center it on here. So this looks center-ish to me. And I'm gonna try to center on here. So maybe around here. And I'm gonna add a point. So this is gonna be my first point. And then maybe the second point will be somewhere here. I'm gonna center it again. And then basically you just keep going down your path. So maybe the next point will be here. So sometimes you're gonna have like cross sections. So for example, the reason why this is not a good circle is because it's including this branching blood vessel as well. So here you kind of just have to use your judgment to kind of try to center it. So I'm gonna say that's about centered. So you keep going down the thing until you reach the end of your one vessel and you're happy with it. And the end result is going to be this. So as you can see, it kind of curls around and it goes down. So that's going to be this is called main for a reason. It's going to be main aorta. And then you keep going with the different blood vessels. So this one is my branch number 1. And then this one's going to be carotid here. Another one here. Another one here. And another one here. So now you have basically a skeleton model of your entire aorta model, basically. So the reason why it's not, so as you can see, all this is done through hand. So obviously, human has a limit to like how centered you can be on the images, but that's okay because these center line is only there to act as a helping step for the next one, which is our segmentation step. So as long as it's like around in the middle, it'll be fine. So I'll show you guys what we do with the center line. So this is to me, this is the coolest part of this software. Okay, so what you're gonna do is we're gonna move on to the next step with segmentations. We're gonna create a contour group, and so for every different one, you're gonna need a different contour group. So the same thing goes. So for each tube that's a blood vessel, you're gonna need a center line. And for each tube, you're gonna need to segment it separately. So I'm gonna start with this one. I'm gonna call it test again. Okay, double click. Okay, as you can see now, this is what the center line does. It's just trying to guide the reslicing. So what does it mean when it says reslicing? It just means that it's gonna reslice perpendicular to the center line along the blood vessel. So I'll move along this and you see how it does. So remember how with the with this, you're gonna have some places where it's not gonna segment very nicely. It's gonna have separating points and everything. But here, because it always segments perpendicular to the center line that you have drawn, you're gonna always have a nice cross section of the blood vessel that you're working on right now. So as you can see, even here it's not, here is definitely like reslicing at a different angle, but it's perpendicular to the center line. So you're still gonna have a nice circle-ish cross section here. It's not gonna be very pretty when it intersects with the other blood vessels. So for example, here, when there's a branching vessel, but we're gonna have a way to avoid that. Okay, so with each reslicing, your goal here is to have an outline or segmentation of the lumen, basically. So you can do this the hard way or the easy way. So the, well, not the hard way or the easy way. Like, so I'll show you guys what I usually do. So there's a lot of different algorithms that you can use to segment it. The easiest one to use, I think, is level set. So what level set does is, yeah, it kind of just goes around the circle and it tries to match it as close as possible, and it can convert it to a spline. Means that it's going to have a few control points that you can adjust if you know, something seems off. So for example, for this slice, very well defined, and it's going to basically segment out this. So you just click level set again, and it's going to show you this. So for example, if I think that, okay, this point needs to be moved out a little bit further, I can just move these control points. I can also add control points if I wanted to. So for example, okay, I'll be happy with that. Other things you can use are threshold, machine learning. So threshold, what it does is that I'm just going to delete this one. So threshold. So for this one, it's not great because I started off with a binary image, and as you can see, the threshold can only set as 0 or 1, which is not good. But if you work with actual CT images to start with, then it's going to be a grayscale, and then you can kind of slide this slider around to it's going to show you a preview of what the segmentation will look like, and you kind of set it to where you want it to be, and again, it will convert it to a spline that you can adjust it later. Machine learning is the one function that I never got it to work for my model. I'm not sure why. And it lags my computer significantly, as you can see. I hope it's going to finish within the next minute. Anyway, so I never got it to work, but apparently it's great for batch learning as well. I might have to restart this. It just crashes. Oh, one very important point. Whenever you're using SimVascular, make sure you click this button very often. It does not autosave. So like once you've done all the painstaking job of creating all the center lines and everything, and you accidentally close it, it does not autosave. Okay, back here. So okay, one of the things you might run into is basically sometimes it's gonna look like this. Nothing works. So what you have to do is you got to observe the cross section. So what's happening is that the size is either too big or too small. So you're gonna test it out to see. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so this is too big now. Let me try. So the goal here, I'm just gonna change this to white. Red does not look pretty. Okay, the point here is to change your slice size so that it encloses your lumen, but not too much. That's what you saw before. That is going to include 2. Because it's just going to confuse the computer. Okay, so like I said, level set is my favorite algorithm to use. So I never change any of these parameters. It just happens to work really well for me. You can change these. So I'm going to convert to spline, and one thing you can do, and so as you can see, there's 108 reslices. And instead of going through all of these one by one, what you can do is you can batch segments. So you don't have to segment every single slice. It's just going to interpolate what's going to happen between the slices. So let's say that I'm going to slice 10 slices from 10 to 100. So obviously, because this follows MATLAB grammar, it's just gonna, so from 10 to 100 with a step of 10. So I'm gonna let it do it for me. Magic. Okay, so this looks pretty good to me, but obviously I'm gonna have to go through these to make sure that the slices are in the right places. So I'm gonna start with this actually, because basically this part is all missed. I don't want to miss all these segments, so I'm gonna, oops. It's gonna reslice everything. Make sure when you're like reslicing, just uncheck the batch. Okay, this is good. Oh, I'm gonna show a lofting preview. So this is not good. It kind of circles back for some, oh, I see, okay. So this is because the first one that I did, it somehow interprets it to be the last slice instead of the first slice, so that's not good. Just gonna delete that one. Make sure everything still works. Okay, so right now, looks pretty good. Just gonna make sure it's actually is what it looks like. So that looks good. Okay, so this one doesn't look too good. So for this one that doesn't look too good, I'm just gonna add another one here. Okay, so this one is glitching right now because it's trying to add all the things, all the new segmentations to the end. This happens sometimes. I really don't know why. What I usually do is I just kind of restart. So, 2, 1, set. All right, cool. So one thing you can notice here is that this one is obviously not good. So we're gonna go to this one. So the reason it's not good, again, is because there's a branching vessel right here. There's a branching vessel that comes out this way. So it's kind of misinterpreting it as part of the lumen. So here we can either draw a circle ourselves. So circle, ellipse, spline, polygon, these are the ones where you literally draw manually, like from where you want it to be. So instead, because there's control points here, I'm just going to delete these control points. So I'm gonna kind of adjust it like that. So now it's fixed. This model is smooth again. Okay, now you go through again the slices. So okay, so here it doesn't look too good to me. Just gonna redo it. So here there's a pretty big curve here that it's not capturing. That's why it's not fitting very well. See, now when I add this, it adds another bit of curve to it instead of just a straight line from one segment to the other. Okay, you keep doing this until you're satisfied with what you have. And I'm going to show you guys what it's supposed to look like. So this is what it looks like when you finish all the adjustments. And you're going to do it for all of them. Okay, I'm just going to show, I'm not going to loft all of them because you're going to see, but the one thing to remember when you are creating intersecting segmentations is that you want to make sure that the first one needs to be completely within the other vessel. So, okay, so this solid white line here is the outline of our main aorta model. Okay, so here, this one. Our first segmentation, it has to be completely within. I know sometimes it doesn't make sense, but if you don't do it, it will crash when you get to the next steps. So for the first one, sometimes I just do it manually to make sure that the first segmentation is completely within the lumen of the intersecting segmentation. So that's everything will connect together smoothly. So once you're satisfied with all of it, then you move on to the next step. So we've done those two. Next step is the modeling. So the next step starts to get very, like all the work is from this step and this step. Like these two will take you a few hours to do. The next step starts just getting like a computer. So the next steps, the computers will take over. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna create a model. You're gonna give it a name. And then you're going to create model. You're gonna select all the ones that you want to be in the model. So in this case, it will be all of them. And then you're gonna click OK. I'm not gonna do it now because it takes some time. But what you're gonna end up with is this. So it's going to have all the walls and all the caps. You can see what it's referring to actually, if you click on it. So for example, this is the wall, this is cap here, this cap, and this is the other cap on the main vessel. So you can see that it's already categorizing all the walls and caps on this map, on this model. And if this step doesn't work, go back to all your lofting and go back to all the first segmentation of the lumen. That's usually what went wrong. Once you have the model, then you're gonna do the mesh. So I'm gonna create a mesh. And you're gonna again so here you can just select your model. And so you're going to estimate an edge size, and it's going to mesh based on that. So you're gonna run measure. So this steps takes, it depends on how powerful your computer is, but it takes like half an hour to an hour on my computer, which is a gaming desktop PC. I suggest just planning that time when you're trying to run your mesh. The parameters I selected here, so these are all the default ones. The one I selected here is to have both surface meshing and volume meshing. You just mesh both and get it done over with, so you don't have to ever remesh again. So once you have the mesh, it's gonna look like this. So hope it shows up. Oh, okay. Load. Okay. So as you can see here, here is the triangular mesh that we have. It is mesh both volume and surface, so you can see that on the edges here, it's pretty good. There's nothing that looks really off here. So the ones you really want to watch for are like, the edges and the intersecting parts. So for example, here, just gonna zoom in here. Everything looks pretty good to me. There's no like, okay, so this is kind of a little bit dangerous here. So this is still okay, but you don't want any like little corners that have way too many elements that squish together, or there's a high chance it's going to crash when you're trying to run the simulations. So I'm gonna say that I'm satisfied with this mesh. And then comes the exciting part after all these modeling is the simulation. So simulations, you usually don't do it on your local computer because it's way too much for even like for my desktop computer. So here you're gonna set a few parameters. So I usually leave these parameters alone. This is the one that you usually have to set for yourself. So for example, so I'm just gonna do the model so it looks a little bit clearer. Okay, so whenever you're not sure what it's referring to, you just click on it and it will show you in yellow which cap it's referring to. So for example, here it's referring to this cap. So this cap is obviously connects to the heart, and this is where all the blood is going to come in from, right? So this boundary condition is going to be a prescribed velocity. So what you're usually going to do is you're going to put in a file. So a file that would, so usually like a text file that includes, show you guys, I should have. Okay, so the file needs to look like, the file needs to look like this. So the first column is going to be the time, and then the second column is going to be your flow, basically. And one thing to remember is that everything needs to be negative because it's flowing into the blood vessel. So just make sure you set everything as negative. So this is a transient kind of heartbeat. So it will change through time, but you can also do very simple modeling of like simple states, steady states. So you just have like time 0, flow like -65, and then time 10, and then the flow will still be -65. And that will be the 2 rows you have, and that will be just steady state flow. Okay, so I'm gonna set the boundary condition. Oh, I already have that, okay. So point number, these are usually good to go. There's a lot of things you can change here. There's much more detailed explanations online in a YouTube video if you guys want. I'm gonna open a flow rate. Just gonna click OK. So that's gonna be your boundary condition for this cap. For the other inlets, so every other one should be an outlet, right? Because this is the only place where blood should be going in. So the other ones, usually an easy one to do is set it as a resistance. So you're gonna input resistance. So for example, like 40,000 or something. And that will be your resistance. So these values, obviously, you can customize all you want to. The thing to remember is just to be consistent in your units. So if you're using, like centimeter cubed in your inlet flow, then make sure you're using the same SI unit orders when you're setting the resistances as well. Wall property is going to be rigid, and then here the time steps. This is basically how many steps you want it to take in between. Like, so for example, if you want this to be like a 10-second heart cycle, 10 heartbeats, then you want to set how many time steps you want it to capture the state of. So the more time steps you have, obviously the more time consuming, the more resource consuming, and the more technically accurate or precise your simulation results are going to be. So you're going to set these yourself. So time steps, time size, time steps between restart. This is basically the number of captures you're going to have. The other ones are very complicated. Again, there's more tutorials online if you guys want to look into it, but I usually leave these alone. I just set time step size, and time stops. Gonna choose your mesh, and then you're gonna create data file simulation. So if you're like me and you're on a Windows computer, you're gonna have to download like another SV solver for yours because it doesn't come with the original package. But like I said, again, usually you don't do this on your local computer, you do it on like a cloud, like Compute Canada. So that I'm not going to go into today, but anyways, so for that one, you're gonna use your MPI and you're gonna use like as many cores as you can. Well, not as many cores as you can, as many cores as reasonably possible. And you're gonna run the simulation. And then you're gonna have basically the number of VTK state files you asked for. Gonna convert the results, and you're gonna have a series of VTK that represents basically the time series of the state. So it's gonna have, what the blood vessel looks like, all the pressure, velocity, flow velocities, and for example, like wall shear stress at each point. It's gonna at time point 1, time point 2, time point 3, and you can visualize all of that in pair view and go from there, basically. So we have done all these, and as you can see, we went from this all the way to a model like this, and then to a mesh that's based off of this. And then you can use that mesh for simulations to do whatever you want. But for our project, we're mostly doing velocity, pressure, and wall shear stress. Thank you for listening. That is my presentation.
Thank you, Miya. That was even your tutorial. So people, this was the first of our 2 tutorials about how to run simulations, starting with images, ending up with hemodynamic models. Miya, can I make a couple of comments, please?
Sure.
So the first comment is we have 2 classes of models that every single one of us is dealing with right now. The first is something that I would sort of call as a policy, a solid model. So it's a structure, it's those tubes that we have. So let's all agree to have a policy to call structures solid models. And followed by that, you might also have a structural model that is now finite element meshed, but that is still a structure. And finally, the distinction between solid models and the dynamic model is that the dynamic model gives you the actual dynamic hemodynamics. And so I propose that we call the dynamic models hemodynamic model. Secondly, the imaging that you received was under license from the National Institute of Health, which was received by yours truly at a license given to a young man called Kyle Van Beek, and he's the one who did the binary segmentation for you.
Thank you, Kyle.
And so that, yeah, so that was the starting point for our aorta modeling between you and me. Yeah. And along the way, although Miya has gone all the way and made 3D structurally detailed models of the aorta, as soon as she has obtained the center lines, we are already ready to do hemodynamic modeling, something that I believe Lawrence will speak about tomorrow. And again, thank you, Miya, for the very, very sort of detailed explanation. So Keith has a question. Go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Karchid and Miya, just a small question. I noticed, Miya, when you were doing the simulation in the tutorial, that they said, what kind of flow would you like to consider? And they had some options. They had Pascal flow, I think they had plug flow and Walmersley flow, and all of those different flows hinge on certain assumptions, not in the least being some sort of symmetry of the domain that you're considering. And so let's say if you implement that simulation, as Dr. Karchid was saying, he says it's fully ready for hemodynamic simulations. I assume simulations that would use the mesh itself and then consider what kind of flow without pre-assuming what kind of flow is there already, right?
Yeah, so with the model, you can do any kind of simulation you want. So you can simulate it with plug flow or with parabolic flow or Wormsley flow. So like obviously with like more, so Wormsley flow is going to have more complicated calculations than parabolic flow, but you can use any of these parameters on the same model.
Right. And so I'm just curious to know how those are, like, if the simulation, because you were mentioning that, you know, the gaming computer, it takes a lot of power and it's a big simulation. So is it simulating them with a predetermined solution and then it's trying to fit it to the model, or is it solving some sort of equation implicitly or explicitly, like in it to do that simulation?
If I can come in
So
here. Sorry, Miya, go ahead.
Okay, so from what I understand with finite elements models, what it does is that it considers each unit and it kind of models what each unit's deformation is, and then you use, for example, the previous nodes, the previous elements, like the triangular elements deformations, to calculate like the forces that's acted onto the next model, and then you use those inputs to have another output for the surrounding next unit. So it's a simulation. So you're going to start with the flow from the cap, and then you're going to basically go from there and see how each element deforms and pushes forces on the next one. So it's definitely not fitting. I don't think so.
Okay.
So as Miya said, Keith, this is a finite element solution of the Navier-Stokes equations for your liquid flow, for your fluid flow.
Gotcha.
Now the Navier-Stokes are coupled to elasticity and perhaps even kinematics at the wall.
Right.
And depending on the kind of physics that you choose, you might then solve for Wormsley flow, for Pursley flow, and that sort of thing.
Okay.
As it so happens, finite elements by definition are always implicit, and so the tetrahedral meshing gives you a implicit linear algebraic system, which you must all solve for all nodes or not at all.
Oh, I see.
But a brief answer to your question is, depending on what kind of physics you're applying to your model, is what Miya is choosing from her GUI. You can also do everything, every single thing that she has described outside of the GUI.
Yes.
So I'm a bit I hesitate to call our sacred compute Canada machines as cloud, because clouds can often drain and disappear. Compute Canada hopefully is available for all our universities forever and ever and ever.
Nice.
So it depends on the physics that you're solving there.
Okay, and then to run the simulations for it, is it assuming like a hyperelastic model for the heart? Because I know that there's a few out, or for the vascular wall, I should say, because it's composed of muscle. And so I know, as you were mentioning, I think earlier today, that the relationship between stress and strain can get complicated when it comes to any kind of muscle tissue.
I think the planned the planned simulations till about the end of next year are not for any kinematics at all, and therefore any elasticity that we are simulating is essentially to obtain further derived quantities such as localized stresses and any combinations of state variables.
Oh,
so if there is any strain being calculated, it might be an infinitesimal strain that is calculated. There is no hyperelasticity as such.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Miya.
About the flow type. That a little
All right.
bit in my.
Yes, so next up is Tim. He'll be presenting a tutorial on FE modeling of aneurysms.